Hello, good morning. I'm Rob Southwick, the president of Southwick Associates, and I'm going to take a few minutes this morning to share with you the latest economic information we have produced on behalf of the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission. I'm going to talk about four different aspects of this project, starting first about why we need fishery economic information. Then I'll talk about the results, share with you what we found. I'll spend a little bit of time after that talking about the methodology. If you're into the details of the study, they are laid out in the technical report that's available from the Commission's website. And then I will share with you what our next steps are in this overall effort. So let's start first about why we need fisheries economics information. Simply put, people like the Great Lakes, whether it's the fisheries, whether it's the lakes as a whole, whether it's recreational opportunities on the lakes. And when people like something, they're willing to act to protect it. It could be through donations, it could be through hands-on volunteer actions, it could be through political actions to help communicate how important something is. We use dollars as that common language. So whether it's dollars we actually spend or what something is worth to somebody. So dollars allows us to quantify how important something is and then compare that to other activities. And of course, once we can clearly communicate with confidence how important the Great Lakes are to society in general, the greater support we will receive and the greater actions we will see to help protect and enhance the Great Lakes. So now let me please take a few minutes to share with you the latest insights we developed in this recent research. First, I will share with you the information we have about the jobs, tax revenues, and other types of economic contributions produced by recreational fisheries. This research begins by first documenting the number of people who fished on the Great Lakes. This information, the number of participants, was produced in close cooperation with the state fisheries agencies and with the Ontario Fisheries Agency. We really appreciate the help from all the agencies, DNRs, in this effort. What you see here is for each state, we have the total number of anglers and the total number of days. In the US, it works out to 1.4 million people fish annually in the Great Lakes, 34.1 million days of fishing occurs on the water. And in Ontario, we have an additional nearly 250,000 people who fish in Lake Ontario. These 1.4 million US anglers and 250,000 Canadian anglers spend a lot of money for each day of fishing, whether it's for travel expenses like fuel, food, bait, or whether it's for equipment, boats, and so forth. It adds up to over $4.1 billion worth of spending a year. And then using our economic models, we measure the total number of jobs. You see here 36,000 jobs are dependent on people taking the day off to go fishing on the Great Lakes. Significant amount of income, nearly $2 billion in salaries and wages and earnings by small businesses on down the line to over $5.1 billion in total economic activity. This is the amount by which the economy would shrink if people stopped fishing and did not spend that money elsewhere. Then we have estimates of just under $1 billion in total tax revenues from people who fish in the Great Lakes. We also have these economic impacts for each state and for Ontario. These are all detailed in the report and they're listed right here. You can see they add up to a significant amount of dollars. We're talking millions and billions, and numbers at some point get pretty large. They're actually difficult to comprehend. In our project, we looked at more than just the recreational fisheries. We also examined the value, the importance, of the commercial fisheries for both the US waters and Canadian waters in the Great Lakes. And we can see the commercial fisheries support an additional 3,000 jobs over and beyond those created by the recreational sector. A significant addition to the regional gross domestic product, that's $123 million, and then provides nearly $90 million in income for households, families along the Great Lakes. Okay, but what does all this mean? As I just mentioned a moment ago, these are large numbers and often they're hard to comprehend because whenever you turn on the news, you hear the millions and billions terms thrown around quite a bit at a point where people are kind of cold to it. It's really hard to comprehend how large these activities are. But we have some insights to assist here. My favorite way of helping people understand how big an activity really is to take these economic contribution estimates and package them into what we call sound bites, simple little communication nuggets that put these numbers into context with things that people understand. For example, what we have right here that the total spending for fishing in the Great Lakes is enough money to buy one of the major NFL franchises, 2 times over. In addition, the total revenues generated by people fishing in the Great Lakes equals the total box office earnings for the top 10 movies in the US in 2023. This is a national number. So the Great Lakes itself, fishing just the Great Lakes, equals the national spending for the top 10 movies. Okay, so we just shared with you the top results from the study. The details are in the technical report, and the summary documents are available on the Great Lakes website. I do want to take a moment to compare the results of this research to previous economic studies of the Great Lakes fisheries, work that we at South Lake Associates had done back then on behalf of the state fish and wildlife agencies. And so you see here the top 3 rows are the total retail sales from the 2011 national survey. This was done by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on a state-by-state basis. Then again, at the 2016 national survey by the Fish and Wildlife Service, that's only at the national level that year. And the third row is our recent study. So you can look at the different spending estimates across all the states. In some cases, like Indiana, you see some significant differences there. Not so many in like Michigan. When you go here to the far right, these are the numbers you typically read about in the media. Um, I want to emphasize that this latest study, one reason why it was done, is much more accurate. The sample sizes, especially at the state level, previously were very small. For example, Minnesota, they had under 20 responses. Most of them had maybe 30 to 50 responses. And as a result, there's a significant margin of error on the state level results and the national results from the previous estimates produced using the national survey. The national survey from the Fish and Wildlife Service, again, was not produced just for the Great Lakes. It was national. So here we are looking at a subset of fishing and then breaking it down by the state level. There's a lot of uncertainty. And then with the economic impacts from those surveys, still greater differences even. Mainly the multiplier effect per dollar spent is lower now than it was in 2011, largely because of the offshoring of jobs, manufacturing of fishing equipment, boating gear, supplies, in other countries, imports from China, Mexico, and elsewhere. Maybe that'll change some going forward, maybe it won't, but it has been going down in recent years. And so the economic impact per dollar spent has also fallen. Bottom line is, strongly recommend don't rely on the older studies, not only because they're older, but because their data were very uncertain going into those estimates, but that's all that was available in the time period. This new study has into the thousands of responses. It's all detailed in the report. Much more reliable. What I've shared with you so far is what we call economic contributions. Those are the benefits created by the dollars that people spend and how they circulate through the economy and benefit everyone. There's another economic value used by economists to explain how important an activity is, and it's really the preferred way to compare the economics across different types of activities or uses of the Great Lakes. We call this economic value. It explains what something is worth to you intrinsically over and beyond what you actually spend for it. So think about it. If you fish, if you're going fishing, it's because the experience you get from a day of fishing is greater than the expenses, your expenditures. If you're going to spend something, if you're going to spend more for something than it's worth to you, you're just not going to do it. A gallon of milk, if it's worth $5 to you, it's $5. You're going to spend less than $5. You're not going to spend $10 for something that's only worth $5 to you. So economic value is a way for us to look at what the net value is to someone after they spend their money. It's what is it intrinsically worth to them? How much better off are they from participating in an activity? So in this study, we measured the economic values for fisheries in the Great Lakes. So for the average user, there's an $82 benefit for each day of fishing. There's a wide range here. For some people, it could be in the hundreds of dollars for a day of fishing. For those who are really not excited about fishing, they went along with their friends maybe, it can only maybe be a couple of bucks. So it does vary greatly by person, but on average, each day of fishing makes people better off, their life better off, if you will, by $82. And you look across all the days of fishing that occur in the US side of the Great Lakes fisheries, you see the total net economic value. This is the value after all the expenditures, the billions are spent. People are better off by $623 million. We have the economic values detailed in the report. It's just for the US side of the water, as we were able to field surveys on the US side of the Great Lakes to produce these values. The economic value is more than just to the user. So it's more than just anglers. As mentioned earlier on in the beginning of the presentation, there's a lot of people who value the existence of the Great Lakes, whether for other recreational purposes or just known as part of the environment and as part of the world that we live in. Value is held by those who don't even actually use the resource under study. And for this study, we measured that publicly held economic value. For example, in the report, you'll see that we asked people would they be willing to spend for a special effort to help maintain, clean the Great Lakes, improve the health of the Great Lakes. And 63% of the public supported a one-time tax increase, so paying a little bit more money in a given year to help improve the Great Lakes. People who know someone who fishes, they value the opportunity for their friends and family members to go fishing. Those people are more likely to support an effort to spend more to improve the Great Lakes. And then looking at the commercial side of the fishery, to avoid a 10% drop in harvest, if you look across all the Great Lakes residents, it's worth $1.1 billion to the general public to help prevent just even a 10% decrease in the fisheries. I'm just going to take a few quick moments to talk about the methodology. It is detailed in the report, and I recognize most of the people attending are not economists. I don't want to kill you with the details. The whole process began in 2019 when we submitted a proposal to the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission's research program. We put in a detailed work plan. It was peer reviewed. We modified it based on the specific interests and needs in the region. And we began the work right as COVID began, actually. So work stopped at the time. It was difficult to get with state agencies and access to licensed data with people working at home outside the firewalls. So the project went on hold for a little bit. We began the project again in 2021. So the work began in the actual surveys, I should say. It started hitting the field around 2023. It was surveys sent to licensed anglers in each of the states using the license data provided by the state agencies. We are very appreciative of their help. These surveys allow us to estimate the average number of days per angler over the course of a year, the total spending on a per trip basis and for equipment. And then we use in-plan economic models to estimate the jobs, tax revenues, and so forth. For Ontario, they had conducted their own survey, angler survey with expenditures. We compiled the expenditures and worked with Stats Canada to run the economic impacts. And we could not have done this work in Ontario without the help from Len Hunt. We are very grateful for the support and the data received. The economic valuation part of the project was led by Dr. John Whitehead of Appalachian State University. He is probably the most experienced valuation economist for fisheries in the US. We're very pleased to have him as part of our team. His work was based on general population surveys of the states in the Great Lakes region, a separate survey than the ones we ran to do the economic contribution estimates. To wrap things up, I do want to remind folks that we do have a very detailed report available from the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission. You can visit their website. There's also summary documents that are meant more for public distribution. Economics is not always the most exciting topic to talk about. So if you're going to reach out to folks who we want to convince, help explain the importance of fisheries, use the short summarized communication pieces produced by the commission. You'll find it much more effective than a detailed technical report. But if you have questions, please let me know. Here's my contact information. I appreciate your time and attention. Shoot me an email if you have a question, if we can help in any particular way. I do want to state that we're in the process now of updating these numbers. They will be released by the end of this year, and they will reflect the 2024 calendar year. We'll produce the same economic impacts, the contributions for both the U.S. and Canadian waters of the Great Lakes, and we'll have updated valuation information as well. Thank you. Have a great day. Goodbye.